Mhm. Good afternoon, Dr. Lynn. My name is Vernon Mason, a graduate of New York Theological Seminary, the MDiv and the DMin program, which I currently am in charge of. I met Bill Weber my first week at New York Theological Seminary, and to describe him as the father and founder of urban ministry in the United States of America is an apt description. To be in the presence of someone who one of the books that we had been required to read from the beginning was Led by the Spirit, the story of New York Theological Seminary. And reading this about his call to ministry when he was in the Navy and in World War II. And then from there, going to seminary, getting his PhD. And then for me, seeing how he moved his young family to East Harlem, where he founded the East Harlem Protestant Parish with two other seminary graduates, and they began in storefront churches. He moved into a housing project, stayed there for many, many years, and really began the seeds of establishing what does it mean to not only be an urban minister, but to live amongst the people, work with the people, send your young children to school with the very community that you have been called to serve, and did that work for 20 years. And just putting this in historical perspective, we're talking about 1948. This is 6 years prior to Brown versus the Board of Education. This is 7 years prior to the Montgomery bus boycott and Dr. King and Rosa Parks and the 20th century civil rights movement. So to meet someone who had that kind of history and legacy, and then following that, the other very, very relevant part of his history for me was he was called as a CEO to basically determine whether or not the Biblical Seminary, New York Theological Seminary, was going to continue functioning. There was a 12-story building, 100 students, and the question was, do we close? And with that background in urban ministry, with his incredible work, I think he's one of the most important theological and educational figures of the 20th century. With that background, he came up with the then radical notion of changing this traditional seminary to one that would serve women, that would serve African Americans, that would serve Hispanics, that would serve Asian Americans, and shifted the very paradigm of theological education in the United States of America. And that was basically the saving grace for New York Theological Seminary. We're talking about 1968, 1969. And then he became president of the seminary. And this book is just fascinating. I recommend this to every student, every person who has not read it. Led by the Spirit, the story of the New York Theological Seminary. And then another phenomenal thing that he did, we are saddled with mass incarceration. This is 2020. In 1981 and 1982, Bill Weber established a program that is unique in this country. He established a Master Professional Studies program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Worked with that for several years, trained his successor, Dr. Edward Hunt, and that program now, this is 1982, has graduated over 500 men and has basically a model for education for the correctional system in this country. It should be replicated all over America, because that was another and just very, very important part of his legacy. I was privileged not only to be his student when I was a Master of Divinity student, but then when I started working at the seminary in 1999, I was privileged to have an office right next to his. And it was my delight that the program that he had started at New York Theological Seminary, Master of Professional Studies program at Sing Sing, we were able to establish a program for young people called Youth Turn. That program served for the next 10 years, from 1999 to 2009, over 5,000 young people throughout the metropolitan area in the city of New York. It was run by the graduates of the MPS program at Sing Sing. Dr. Lonnie McLeod, who got his MDiv at New York Theological Seminary, one of the graduates of the MPS program, and was one of the first students in the MPS program at Sing Sing. He and I became directors of this Youth Turn program, and the graduates of the MPS program worked in partner churches, worked with MDiv students to serve all of these young people. And the way that program started, again, is the legacy of Bill Weber. At one of the graduation exercises in the early 90s, one of the graduates said, if I had known people like Bill Weber and the people here at New York Theological Seminary, I never would have come to prison. And based upon that valedictorian saying that at that graduation exercise, Ford Foundation, New York State Office of Children and Family Services said, why don't we establish a program for these young people? Because most of the people we're talking about, they were very young when they went to prison. And so it was birthed out of the MPS program, birthed out of that valedictorian speech. And again, I attribute that to the foresight, very radical, very relevant, very revolutionary, of Bill Weber back in 1981, 1982. So that's another legacy. The George Weber lectures that we've been doing for now, for 26 years, have had some of the leading theologians in theological education. And it's named the Urban Ministry Lecture, because those persons, Katie Cannon, James Cohen, people from all over the United States, gave him that kind of honor and reverence and tribute. So I really, it's just a delight to even talk about it. When I think about it now, I can envision the Bill Weber smiling down over the balconies of heaven, looking down upon his legacy now being led by an African-American woman, the Reverend Dr. Lakeisha Wallen, Vice President and Academic, Vice President and Dean of Academic Affairs, Dr. Tamara Henry. I could see him smiling down from those balconies, looking down on something that he started those years ago. Women were not in seminary. Black people, it was not a tradition of seminaries around the country to accept Black people, to accept Asian Americans, to accept Latinx, those communities. But he lived throughout his life, throughout his ministry, throughout all of the things that he did and accomplished. He was true. I think about, for him, how fitting it is, the passage in Luke, 4th chapter, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and anointed to bring good news to the poor, to pardon the prisoners, Bill Weber lived out that legacy, and so it is just a delight to even talk about him. Having met him as a student, then having worked with him as a colleague, and then having seen that when he came to New York Theological Seminary, it was his foresight in changing a traditional model of theological education to one that encompassed urban communities that really saved this institution.
So, Dr. Mason, you were a civil rights lawyer and a champion for civil rights in not just New York but the entire nation. Tell me more about what you knew of Bill Weber in that, as far as race relations and his very visionary work, right, on racial progress.
I consider Bill Weber. I would place him in the pantheon of people like Howard Thurman, the people like Martin Luther King Jr. Bill Weber, Dr. Lynn, did not have to do what he did. He was privileged. He was educated. He spoke out against the Vietnam War. The Black men predominantly whom he worked with at Sing Sing, they revered him because of his sincerity and authenticity. If you could describe someone who really did not give lip service to the beloved community, but lived it out, it would be Bill Weber. As I said, when I met him, it was a privilege. When I met him, it was an honor. And Bill Weber was, because this is our current mission with President Warren and Dean Henry. Our new value statement, our new mission in terms of relevance, restorative, and revolutionary, he embraced that. And so it was a delight talking to him. He was as radical as he aged as he was when he started. And so I looked up to him not only as that important figure, but as a mentor, as a teacher, as someone who you could have candid discussions about issues around the world and in this country. And so as someone with the background that I had, I considered him a beloved mentor. And it was my privilege when we became colleagues when I began working at New York Theological Seminary.
So as you know, he was named a prophet for the cause of justice when Yale gave him an honorary degree. Mm-hmm. Tell us more about how this was fitting to him and how you saw him mm-hmm. as a prophet for mm-hmm. the cause of justice, and mm-hmm. of course the legacy that he left here, right? The New York mm-hmm. Theological Seminary, because of him, mm-hmm. it's a seminary prophetically existence of the justice. So tell us, as somebody who was there with him and still here now.
Right. One, I think the award, and again, we're talking 1981, was absolutely deserved. Yale understood when they gave him that award that this was someone who stood for justice, again, in 1948, embraced the concepts being developed by Gandhi, and then lived out with Dr. King in terms of looking at the gospel as the gospel of Jesus, not what had been practiced at that time. So he stood out in that regard. He then did not seek to become a pastor of a large mega church, but went and started storefront churches in East Harlem, worked there in the community, with the people, God's people, for the next several years. Stood up at a time when it was not popular to talk against the war in Vietnam. Embraced the and in terms of race, Bill Weber was a model, a paradigm of how it should be, because when he talked about justice, and when he talked about racism, when he talked about those things, they were not speeches. He lived this. There was no program similar to the Master Professional Studies program at a prison in the country, and he brought that about. So, and this was again for almost predominantly Black and Hispanic persons who were incarcerated. He looked at them as human beings. He looked at them as people whose education would make a difference in their lives, and it did. Some of those graduates have become directors of some of the most important programs in this country. So that for me, as someone who worked in civil rights all of those years, I consider him absolutely a prophet for the cause of justice.
What would you say to a lot of our students today, obviously have, and for myself including the staff and administration, we've never had the privilege to meet Bill Weber. What would you tell us to encourage us to continue in that spirit of the prophet for the cause of justice, as we are now part of his legacy in this seminary?
First thing I will tell everyone to get a copy of this book, Led by the Spirit. Then there are these, what is it now, over almost 30 lectures that have been given, one by Dr. Keith Russell, my mentor, and others to study those lectures, and then do their own independent research, but look, especially when you're affirming your call and you're thinking about God's purpose in your life, look at how he began during a war, during World War II. It's inspiring for me, especially Dr. Lynn, because his original aspiration was to become a lawyer. And then in the war, he changed that and was called to ministry. And look at what he accomplished. One person. Look at the difference that he made in the lives of thousands of people. Look at the difference that he made in basically as a founder of urban ministry. Look at the difference that he made in East Harlem. Look at the difference that he made at New York Theological Seminary. One of the things that I would say to those who are looking at his legacy is it's a study in leadership. It's a study in education. It's a study in ministry to even see how he went about noting that there was a need to change a tradition, the traditional way in which theological education had been taught, and to whom it was being taught to. Seeing how he embraced that, changed that, advocated for that, and then made that a success, where New York Theological Seminary, under the leadership of President Warren Dean Henry, I am really, really excited about what they are doing. I'm excited about Dr. Walren's vision, the mission statement. I'm excited. I really see this as for such a time as this, when not only she has embraced the work that was done and is being done in the MPS program at Sing Sing, because I envision that that program should be modeled in every state in this union. We should have a seminary partnering with a correctional institution to replicate that program. That would have dramatic effects on mass incarceration in this nation. And so those would be some of the things that I would point out. What does it mean when you're called to ministry, to minister to God's people? He is pointing us in various directions. And as I said, I really appreciate and fully support what President Warren and Dean Henry are doing at New York Theological Seminary, because I think it really embraces that legacy that was established and that work in ministry that he's done. The last point that I would make, and in just kind of preparing for this somewhat, I am just so excited that during this time at New York Theological Seminary, during a pandemic, President Warren is our president, leading us. Dean Henry now, Vice President of Academic Affairs, leading us. That looking at what Bill Weber faced back in 1968, 1969, it's inspiring because it shows that the work that they are doing not only can be done, but at a different time in the history of the seminary.
Yeah.
The kind of leadership, and I really love the relevant, restorative, revolutionary, the kind of leadership that we have now. Again, as I said, I could see and envision Bill Weber leaning over the balconies of heaven, smiling down as a cheerleader with tears of joy, saying to both of them that they both understand the legacy, understand where God is directing them, and that we will get there. We will get there. I'm convinced of that.